This was easily the toughest year of my tenure. That's what Georgia coach Kirby Smart said after Georgia's tough Sugar Bowl loss to Notre Dame. And he's right. And listen, this was year 8 for Kirby Smart, and he's already come out and said, hey, that was the toughest that it's been, which says a lot because year 1 was really tough before getting it together in 2017. And I know that this season was a massive disappointment, although they did win the SEC, which is a big deal, right? Flags fly forever, and there's going to be a 2024 SEC championship flag flying in Sanford Stadium, for the rest of time, right? But they didn't win the national championship, and that was the ultimate goal. But he was asked that question while he was talking to 2 of the captains, of the leaders, right? Jalen Walker, best linebacker in college football, and Tate Ratledge, who has been on the team for a long, long time now. He came in that 2020 class. And here's what he had to say about those guys. In addition to why this was the toughest year of his tenure, he said, hey, they dominated the room. They controlled the room. They led the room through hard games and situations. There were some hard games and situations this year, and he was talking about how Jalen Walker helped lead the defense, Tate Ratledge helped lead the offense, but I think that you have to remember what this team went through. Yes, they lost 3 games. It's unacceptable, right? And they didn't play to their standard, but man, this team went through the gauntlet this year. They got it kicked off against a really good top 10 Clemson team in Mercedes-Benz, and they won 34-3. Now, it was a little tough, right? The first half, Georgia could not get things going offensively, and at the time, you didn't know it was going to be a theme throughout the season, but they would have a hard time scoring points in the first half throughout the season. And we saw it in that game 1. Just didn't know at the time that it would be a consistent theme for the rest of the season, but they got it together in the second half and took off with that game. And I think you can make the argument that the second half against Clemson was the best this team has played all year long. They definitely had some downs, but they definitely had some ups too. There was a lot of success from the season, but there were plenty of problems too. And at the end of the day, this team couldn't overcome the problems that they had from day 1 throughout, the season. And it just came back to haunt them against Notre Dame. But they week 2, they had a cupcake, Tennessee Tech. Then they go up to Lexington, week 3, and they barely scraped by, right? 13-12. It was an ugly day offensively. And at that point, you're thinking, okay, that was the one game where they go on the road, they escape, they win, and then they get it figured out, right? And they'll just crush everyone else in their way, or most of the teams, right? But no, that was kind of a red flag. At the time, we thought it was orange, but it was a red flag. I think Oscar fumbled at the end of that game, and if Kentucky falls on it, they're 1 first down away from being in field goal range and winning that game. And that was tight, but they won. They get the week off. They go to Tuscaloosa, and we saw what happened there. One of the wildest games of the year. They lost 41-34, but epic comeback, right? Down 28-0, came all the way back to take the lead, had their chance to win, but they didn't. They didn't execute enough down the stretch, and they couldn't overcome a just disaster of a first half. But still, we saw the fight. We saw the adversity that the team pushed through, even though they lost. So they have 1 loss on the schedule. Not a big deal. Still everything to play for. They go out and beat a bad Auburn team, 31-13, stress-free. Week after that, they beat a bad Mississippi State team, 41-31. They beat them worse than the scoreboard indicated, but still, the problems we kind of saw there with the secondary. That was the big issue the week after the State game was, hey, you can throw on this team, and they've got issues at cornerback. They've got to attack the passer a little bit. So defensively, saw some issues in that game. Then they go to Austin, Texas, and play elite defense, and they win 30-15. Maybe their most impressive win of the season, going on the road and dominating the line of scrimmage the way they did. That defense was incredible. One of the best defensive performances that we've seen from a Kirby Smart defense in a couple years, right? Solid win. They go down to Gainesville. They beat Florida. Again, they kind of got down, and it wasn't great in that first half, but they fought through. They won 34-20. Then they go to Oxford. They lose. Very similar to the way they lost to Notre Dame. They just didn't come out and play well, and they didn't execute, and they didn't have enough playmakers on the outside to help out Carson Beck and to help out Gunnar Stockton in those games. Couldn't run the ball. Tough defensively. They tried to fight. It just wasn't enough, and they lost to Ole Miss. Great win against Tennessee, 31-17 at home against South Bend, Tennessee. Quality win. They beat a cupcake in UMass. They have the 8 overtime win against Georgia Tech, 44-42 win. Unbelievable game. beat Texas in the SEC championship again, 22-19 in overtime, and then lose to Notre Dame. So, I mean, the schedule was what it was. And at the end of the day, they were banged up too. And that's what I think Kirby Smart's talking about when he says, this was easily the toughest year of my tenure. And I'm not even talking about, what happened to his dad, unfortunately, yesterday morning with his dad, Sonny, passing away. He talked about this after the Sugar Bowl, and his dad was on his mind. Obviously, he knew things were not going well, but just a really, really tough year overall for Kirby Smart, especially personally with what happened. But from a team perspective, they went through the ringer and they were beat up. The offensive line was beat up throughout the season. The running back spot, right? Trevor Etienne had to miss the first game due to an offseason arrest. Roderick Robinson got hurt with the turf toe. Didn't really see him all year long except a couple runs against Cupcake number 2. Branson Robinson wasn't the same. Might not ever be the same that we saw flashes of as a freshman. So a lot of the time they had to rely on a freshman running back who is very talented in Nate Frazier. There's a lot to like, but he's still a young pup, still learning the game, still putting the ball on the ground a little too much. So when you couldn't establish the run all year long, you just started to think maybe this is not Georgia's year. But they were playing well defensively when they needed to against quality teams, and they were winning tight games, and they were winning games in the fourth quarter, and they were fighting through adversity. They were coming back, right? This team was playing from behind in almost every game. I think they were losing in 9-10 games this season. Some of it was just 3-0, 7-0, but still, they have shown the ability to fight back and be resilient. And that's what I was talking with some of the guys about. But their lack of run game was huge, and Kirby Smart talked about that as well. He said when someone asked him, hey, why couldn't they run the ball this year? Especially seeing what they did last year and the years before that too. So it was very different to see Georgia struggle this much. He said, number one, we played some really good defenses. The one was a really good defense. We played some really good defense. I don't know why I accidentally typed that 3 times. He said we had a rotating lineup on the offensive line with guys who rolled in and out, and we haven't created the same thing on defense that we've done in the past. If you go to past years' defenses, we created more turnovers, better third downs to get the ball back. There's a lot of things we can do better to help our offense, but we certainly have to play better and do better. And a lot of that has to do with the health and the schedule we play and having some playmakers that can make plays too. So again, there's a lot that they've got to clean up and address in the offseason. You've got to have better playmakers, guys who can consistently catch the football. You need to find more offensive linemen to come in. I mean, they're going to lose several guys. To some people, that might be a good thing, but it's never ideal to be throwing in 3 to 4 new starters on the offensive line, which is what they're going to have to do next year. So you got to get healthy at running back. Ideally, Trevor Etienne would be back for another season, but you're going to still rely a lot on Nate Frazier. And I think Cash Jones could come back. Maybe he walked during senior night, but I think he might be able to come back with the new rules. I mean, I feel like everyone is able to come back if they want to nowadays. We got 23, 24-year-olds still playing college football. It's absolutely ridiculous. But, I mean, if Cash Jones has an opportunity to come back and play for the Dogs next year, he's going to take it, right? And so we'll see a little more Dwight Phillips and Chauncey Bowens, but they need more playmakers everywhere. At receiver, on the offensive line. They lack elite tackles on the offensive line too, which is something that we've seen Georgia have kind of year after year after year. This year, they were not dominant on the offensive line, and they don't have that one top first-round pick that can anchor either the left or the right side. So, that really hurt them this year. But at the end of the day, you go back and look at this team, what they had to do, the schedule they faced, the injuries they battled from. I think there's a lot of respect that you have to give the coaches and the players. And listen, the coaches have to go get better players if they want to improve. I mean, that's just a fact. The coaches have to do better, and the players have to do better. The players have to execute better, but the coaches probably need to have a better game plan too, because when you're coming out in the first half and struggling every week to get points on the board through the first 2 quarters, that's a player thing too. When you're not doing what you're supposed to, you're not blocking the right guys, you're not catching the football, but that's also on the coaching. So there's a lot of blame to go around. It's not just one thing or this thing. It's not just the coaches or just the players. It's a mix of everything, and they did not get the job done this year, obviously, but there's still a lot, I think, to be proud of. You can call this season a disappointment all you want. I totally get it. They lost 3 games, right? And this was a team that, Everyone thought going in could win another national title. So when you lose 3 games, it is disappointing, but there are some positives to come out of this. But Kirby Smart's out here saying this was the toughest year of my tenure for a lot of reasons. Again, so when you look down the schedule, they battled and they won a lot of battles. They won most of their battles, but they didn't win enough. And hopefully, for Kirby Smart, his year is a little better next year, because I can't imagine what he's going through. Obviously, today with his father passing just yesterday, so really tough time. Hopefully, now it's the end of the season, he can kind of regroup and spend some time with his family. I think much needed time after a really long, draining season. But the job's to get better and improve his football team, and eventually he'll get back to doing that. But there's a lot of problems that they've got to address. But hey, I think it will get a little easier, especially because he said this was the toughest year of my tenure. So that's what Kirby had to say. What do you think? Let me know in the comments section below. Was this the toughest season George has had in the last 8 years? I think he's got a real point. What do you think? Let me know in the comment section. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.